The dust hung thick in the air the day Victoria Langford watched her betrothed, Charles Whitmore, pound his fist on her father's oak desk and demand the entire dowry be handed over before he would even consider standing at the altar. She stood frozen in the doorway of her father's study, her cream-colored dress suddenly feeling too tight around her chest as she struggled to breathe through the shock of what she was hearing. "I will not be made a fool, Edmund," Charles said, his voice cold and calculating. $3,000, delivered to my bank account tomorrow morning, or there will be no wedding on Saturday. I have debts to settle, investments to make. I cannot wait for your daughter's inheritance to trickle in over the years." Victoria's father, Edmund Langford, looked up from where he sat behind his desk, his weathered face pale with distress. It was April 1883 in Taylor, Texas, and the cotton merchant had built his fortune through honest work and careful dealings. He had never encountered such brazen greed, especially not from a man he had welcomed into his home and trusted with his only daughter's future. "Charles, that money is meant to provide for Victoria's security," Edmund said slowly, trying to maintain his composure. "It is her protection should anything happen. The agreement was that it would be transferred after the marriage, as is proper and customary." "Customary," Charles laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I make my own customs, old man. Either you agree to my terms or I walk away." I am sure Victoria understands that at 23 she is hardly in a position to be particular about suitors. How many proposals has she received in the past 5 years? One. Mine. Victoria felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She had known Charles for 8 months, had accepted his proposal because her father approved, and because she had foolishly believed his pretty words about building a life together. But this man standing in her father's study, speaking about her as though she were livestock past her prime, was a stranger wearing Charles Whitmore's handsome face. She must have made some sound, because both men turned to look at her. Charles's expression shifted immediately, a practiced smile sliding into place. "Victoria, darling, I did not realize you were there. Your father and I are simply discussing business matters, nothing for you to concern yourself with." "I heard everything," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You demand my dowry before we are even married. You speak of me as though I am some burden to be disposed of." "Do not be dramatic," Charles said, his smile tightening. "I am simply ensuring that our marriage begins on solid financial footing. Surely you can understand that." "What I understand," Victoria said, lifting her chin despite the trembling in her hands, "is that you do not love me. You love my father's money." Charles's mask slipped entirely then, his eyes going hard. "Love? What does love have to do with marriage? You are a plain woman from a good family with a substantial fortune. I am willing to give you my name and social standing. That is the transaction. If you are too foolish to see the practical value in that, then perhaps you deserve to end up a spinster after all." "Get out of my house," Edmund Langford said, rising to his feet with a fury Victoria had never seen in her gentle father. "Get out now, and do not ever speak to my daughter again." Charles straightened his jacket, his lip curling. "You will regret this, both of you. I will make certain that everyone in Taylor knows that Victoria Langford is a shrew who drove away her only chance at marriage. No respectable man will come near her after I am through spreading word of her temperament." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the windows rattled. Victoria stood motionless until she heard the front door slam as well, followed by the sound of his horse galloping away. Only then did her knees give out and she sank into the nearest chair. "Victoria," her father said gently, coming around the desk to kneel beside her. "I am so sorry. I thought he was a good man. I thought he would care for you." "It is not your fault, Papa," she whispered. "I should have seen it. The way he always asked about your business, about the details of my inheritance. I thought he was simply being practical, planning for our future. But he never once asked about my dreams, my thoughts. He never cared who I was at all." Edmund took her hand. "You are worth more than all the money in Texas, my dear. Any man who cannot see that is a fool. We will weather whatever gossip Charles spreads. Your reputation will survive, because anyone who knows you knows your true character." But over the next 3 days, as word spread through Taylor about the broken engagement, Victoria began to doubt her father's optimism. Charles had indeed been busy. Women who had been friendly at church suddenly avoided her eyes. Men who had tipped their hats to her on the street now crossed to the other side. The story being told was not the truth, but rather a twisted version in which Victoria had made impossible demands, had been shrewish and ungrateful, had driven away a perfectly good man with her airs and her cold nature. By Thursday afternoon, Victoria could not stand being in town any longer. She saddled her mare, Daisy, and rode out to the edge of her father's property, where a creek ran through a grove of cottonwood trees. It was her favorite place, a spot she had claimed as her own since childhood. She dismounted and sat on the bank, finally allowing herself to cry. She wept for her shattered dreams, for the realization that she had been so blind, for the loneliness that stretched ahead of her. Charles had been cruel, but perhaps not entirely wrong. She was 23, plain-featured with brown hair and brown eyes, too tall and too fond of reading books. In a town like Taylor, where pretty young girls were plentiful and marriageable men were scarce, she had been lucky to receive even one proposal. Now that was gone, and her reputation was in tatters. "Excuse me, miss. Are you all right?" Victoria gasped and scrambled to her feet, hastily wiping her eyes. A man stood a few yards away, his horse grazing beside Daisy. He was tall and lean, dressed in worn denim pants and a dusty blue shirt. A cowboy hat shaded his face, but she could see dark hair and eyes that held genuine concern. "I am fine," she said quickly, embarrassed to be caught in such a state. "I did not realize anyone else came out here. This is private property." "I apologize," he said, not moving closer but not leaving either. "I have been driving cattle to the stockyards in Taylor for Mr. Henderson. We have been on the trail for near 3 weeks, and I wanted to find a quiet spot to water my horse before heading into town. I did not mean to intrude on your solitude." There was something gentle in his voice that made Victoria's defensiveness crumble. "No, I apologize. I should not have snapped at you. You are welcome to water your horse. The creek is plentiful." He led his horse to the water, and Victoria found herself studying him. He moved with an easy grace, comfortable in his own skin in a way she had never managed. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and the kind of quiet strength that came from hard work rather than boasting. "I am Bennet Bradford," he said after his horse had drunk its fill, "though most folks just call me Ben." "Victoria Langford," she replied, then immediately wished she had not given her name. Surely even cowboys passing through town had heard the gossip by now. But Ben's expression did not change, no judgment or curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Langford. I do not mean to pry, but are you certain you are all right? You seem troubled." Perhaps it was because he was a stranger, someone passing through who had no connection to the gossip and judgment of Taylor. Perhaps it was because his eyes were kind and his voice was gentle. Whatever the reason, Victoria found herself telling him everything. She told him about Charles, about the dowry demand, about the humiliation and the gossip. She told him about feeling trapped and foolish and utterly alone. Ben listened without interrupting, his attention never wavering, and when she finally fell silent, he was quiet for a long moment. "A man like that would not do," he said finally, his voice firm. "Any man who treats a woman's worth as a transaction, who demands payment before proving himself, that is not a man at all. That is a coward and a cheat." Victoria felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were different. "You are the first person to say that. Everyone else acts as though I was the one in the wrong, as though I should have been grateful for his attention regardless of how he treated me." "Then everyone else is a fool," Ben said bluntly. "Begging your pardon for speaking plain, but I have met men like your Charles Whitmore before. They see the world as something to be used, people as things to be exploited. They do not have honor, and they do not deserve respect." "Thank you," Victoria whispered. "You cannot know how much it means to hear someone say that." Ben shifted his weight, seeming uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I only spoke the truth, miss. Any decent person would say the same." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily. Ben told her about life on the trail, about the cattle drives and the vast stretches of Texas prairie. He spoke of stars so thick they looked like spilled milk across the sky, of thunderstorms that rolled across the horizon like armies, of the satisfaction that came from honest work well done. Victoria found herself laughing for the first time in days, as Ben described some of the mishaps that had occurred on the drive, his self-deprecating humor making the disasters seem almost charming. She told him about her love of reading, about the books she had ordered from catalogs and how they transported her to worlds beyond Taylor. "I would like to see more of the world someday," she admitted, "but I suppose that is a foolish dream for a woman in my position." "Why foolish?" Ben asked. "The world is wide and full of wonders. Everyone should have the chance to see some of it. Women do not just travel alone," Victoria said with a sad smile. "We go where our fathers or husbands take us, or we stay home. Those are the choices." "Seems like there should be more choices than that," Ben said thoughtfully. "But I suppose society has its rules, whether they make sense or not." The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon when Ben finally said he needed to get into town before dark. "Mr. Henderson will be wondering where I have gotten to. But Miss Langford, if you would not mind, I would like to call on you tomorrow. Properly, I mean at your home, if your father would permit it." Victoria's heart skipped. "You want to call on me, but you barely know me." "I know enough," Ben said simply. "I know you are kind and intelligent and brave enough to stand up to a bully even when it costs you. I know that talking with you this afternoon has been the best part of my month. I would like to know more, if you will allow it." "Yes," Victoria said, the word escaping before she could think better of it. "Yes, I would like that very much." Ben's smile transformed his face, and Victoria realized with a start that he was handsome, though in a different way than Charles. Where Charles had been polished and aware of his own attractiveness, Ben had an honest, open quality that made her feel safe rather than nervous. "Tomorrow, then," he said, tipping his hat to her. "Around 2 in the afternoon, if that suits." "That would be perfect," Victoria said. She watched him ride away, then mounted Daisy and headed home, her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time since the disaster with Charles, she felt a flicker of hope. Edmund Langford was surprised but pleased when Victoria told him about Ben's intended visit. "A cowboy," he said thoughtfully. "Not what I would have expected, but after Charles Whitmore, I am inclined to judge a man by his character rather than his profession or social standing." "I do not know if it will lead to anything, Papa," Victoria said quickly. "He is just being kind, I think." "We shall see," her father said with a knowing smile. Ben arrived promptly at 2 the next afternoon, wearing clean clothes and with his hair neatly combed, though his hands still bore the calluses of hard work. He spoke with Edmund for nearly 30 minutes, answering questions about his background and his prospects with honest directness. He had been born in Missouri, he explained, but his parents had died of fever when he was 16. He had worked various jobs before finding his place as a drover, moving cattle across Texas for ranchers who needed reliable men. He had saved most of his wages over the past 7 years and had plans to eventually buy a small piece of land and start his own ranch. "I am not a wealthy man, Mr. Langford," Ben said plainly. "But I am honest, and I work hard, and I have never cheated or stolen or hurt anyone if I could help it. I cannot offer your daughter luxury, but I can promise to treat her with respect and care." Edmund studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "That is all any father can ask for." "You have my permission to court my daughter, Mr. Bradford, if she is agreeable." "I am agreeable," Victoria said quickly, earning a chuckle from both men. Over the next 2 weeks, Ben called on Victoria every day. Sometimes they walked through town together, ignoring the stares and whispers. Sometimes they rode out to the creek and talked for hours. Ben brought her wildflowers and listened with genuine interest when she spoke about the books she loved. Victoria learned about his dreams of building a ranch, of raising horses as well as cattle, of creating something lasting. What struck Victoria most was how Ben treated her as an equal. He asked her opinions and listened to her answers. He never dismissed her thoughts as foolish or unimportant. When she mentioned that she had always wanted to learn to rope cattle, he spent an entire afternoon teaching her, patient and encouraging even when she missed again and again. "You are getting better," he said, after she finally managed to catch the fence post they were using as a target. "You have good instincts. You just need practice." "Charles would have laughed at the very idea of me doing something like this," Victoria said, coiling the rope carefully. "He said women should focus on managing households and looking pretty." "Charles was an idiot," Ben said flatly. "Women can do most anything men can, given the chance. My mother could shoot better than my father, and she ran their farm accounts because she was better with numbers. Being good at something has nothing to do with whether you are a man or woman. It is about whether you are willing to learn and work at it." Victoria felt warmth spread through her chest. "You are unlike any man I have ever met, Ben Bradford." "I will take that as a compliment," he said with a grin, but their courtship was not without complications. Charles Whitmore had not left town as everyone expected. Instead, he had remained, spreading increasingly vicious gossip and making veiled threats. When he saw Victoria and Ben walking together one afternoon, his face had gone purple with rage. "So the shrew has found herself a cowboy," Charles called out, loud enough for everyone on the street to hear. "How fitting. A low woman with a low man." Ben had stiffened, but Victoria had tightened her grip on his arm. "Do not," she whispered. "He wants to provoke you. Do not give him the satisfaction." Ben had nodded tightly and steered them away, but she could feel the tension in his body. That evening he spoke to her father again. "Mr. Langford, I need to be honest with you. I care deeply for Victoria. These past 2 weeks have been the happiest of my life. But I am worried about what my courtship is costing her. The gossip is getting worse, and that Whitmore fellow seems determined to cause trouble. If my presence is making things harder for her, I will step aside." "Absolutely not," Victoria said firmly, entering the room without bothering to knock. "Ben Bradford, you listen to me. I do not care what Charles Whitmore says or what anyone in this town thinks. You are the first man who has ever treated me like a person rather than property. You are kind and honest and good. If you leave now because of gossip, I will never forgive you." Ben looked at her, his expression torn. "I do not want to cause you pain, Victoria." "The only thing that would cause me pain is losing you," she said, then blushed at her own boldness. "I mean, losing your friendship, your company." "Is it just friendship you would miss?" Ben asked softly, stepping closer. "Because for me, it has become something more. I am falling in love with you, Victoria Langford. I think I started falling that first day at the creek. And I know it has only been 2 weeks. I know it is too soon to speak of such things, but I cannot help it. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met." Victoria felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I am falling in love with you too. I did not think I could feel this way so quickly, so deeply. But when I am with you, everything makes sense. Everything feels right." Ben cupped her face gently, his calloused thumbs wiping away her tears. "Then may I court you properly with the intention of marriage, when you are ready, I mean. I will not rush you, I will wait as long as you need." "Yes," Victoria whispered. "Yes to courting, and yes to marriage when the time is right." Edmund cleared his throat from where he still sat at his desk. "I suppose I should mention that I am still in the room." Victoria and Ben jumped apart, both blushing furiously, and Edmund laughed. "But I will say this, Mr. Bradford, you have my blessing. I can see that you love my daughter, and more importantly, I can see that she loves you. That is all that matters." The next month passed in a blur of happiness. Ben took odd jobs around Taylor to extend his stay, working at the livery stable and helping with fence repairs for local ranchers. He was saving money for a ring, though Victoria told him repeatedly that she did not need anything fancy. "You deserve something beautiful," he insisted. "You deserve everything." But Charles Whitmore was becoming increasingly unhinged. He had lost money gambling, and the debts he had mentioned to Edmund had apparently been more serious than anyone realized. Creditors from Austin had arrived looking for him, and his reputation was in tatters. He blamed Victoria and Ben for his troubles. If Victoria had married him as planned, he would have had access to her dowry and could have paid his debts. Instead, he was facing financial ruin and possible legal consequences. One evening in late May, Victoria was walking home from visiting a friend when Charles stepped out of an alley, blocking her path. He had been drinking. She could smell the whiskey on him, and his eyes were wild. "This is all your fault," he said, his words slurring slightly. "You ruined everything. You were supposed to marry me. That money was supposed to be mine." "Step aside, Charles," Victoria said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You are drunk. Go home and sleep it off." "I am not going anywhere," he said, grabbing her arm roughly. "You owe me, Victoria. You owe me for the humiliation, for the damage to my reputation. If I cannot have the money, then I will at least have the satisfaction of ruining you completely." Victoria tried to pull away, but his grip was too strong. "Let me go." "I do not think so," Charles said, starting to drag her back toward the alley. "We are going to have a little talk, you and I, about what you owe me." The lady said to let her go. Ben's voice cut through the evening air like a knife. He stood at the entrance to the alley, his posture deceptively relaxed but his eyes hard as stone. "This does not concern you, Cowboy," Charles said, but Victoria felt his grip loosen slightly. "Anything concerning Victoria concerns me," Ben said, moving closer. "Now let her go and walk away and we can forget this happened." "Or what?" Charles sneered, finally releasing Victoria's arm and turning to face Ben. "You will fight me. You will assault me in the middle of town. I am a gentleman. You are nothing but a drifter." "Who do you think the law will believe?" "I do not care what the law believes," Ben said quietly. "I care about protecting the woman I love, and if that means fighting you, so be it." Charles swung wildly, but he was drunk and clumsy. Ben dodged easily and delivered a single, precise punch that sent Charles sprawling into the dirt. He stood over him, breathing hard. "You stay away from Victoria," Ben said, his voice low and dangerous. "You stay away from her father, you stay away from their property. If I hear that you have so much as spoken her name, I will come back, and next time I will not be so gentle. Do you understand me?" Charles nodded, blood trickling from his nose. Ben turned his back on him and took Victoria's arm gently. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, though she was shaking. "He frightened me, but I am not hurt. Thank you, Ben, if you had not come along when you did." "Do not think about it," he said firmly. "You are safe now, that is all that matters." But the incident had shaken them both. That night, Edmund met with the town sheriff and filed a formal complaint against Charles. Between the assault on Victoria and the outstanding debts and gambling problems, Charles was strongly encouraged to leave Taylor and not return. He departed the next morning, and Victoria felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. 2 weeks later, on a warm June evening, Ben took Victoria back to the creek where they had first met. The cottonwood trees rustled in the breeze, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Victoria," Ben said, taking her hands in his, "I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your intelligence and your kindness and your strength. I love how you see the world, how you challenge me to be better. I love everything about you." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "I am not a wealthy man," he continued. "I cannot offer you a mansion or servants or society parties, but I can offer you my heart, my loyalty, and my promise to spend every day trying to make you happy. Victoria Langford, will you marry me?" Victoria was crying openly now, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you. I do not care about mansions or parties. I care about you, about building a life together. Yes, Ben, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. Their first kiss was sweet and tentative, full of promise and hope. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling so widely their faces hurt. "When?" Ben asked. "When can we get married?" "I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." "Neither do I," Victoria laughed. "But we should probably give my father at least a few weeks to plan. He will want to do this properly." "A few weeks," Ben agreed. "I suppose I can wait that long. Barely." They were married on the first Saturday in July at the small church in Taylor. It was a simple ceremony, with only close friends and family in attendance. Victoria wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit, and carried wildflowers that Ben had picked for her that morning. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, there was only warm silence. When Ben kissed his bride, there was not a dry eye in the church. Edmund had given them a generous wedding gift, a deed to 200 acres of good grazing land west of Taylor, along with enough money to build a small house and buy starter cattle. It was more than Ben had ever dreamed of having, and he had to wipe away tears as he thanked his father-in-law. "You are family now," Edmund said simply. "And you have given me back my daughter's smile. That is worth any amount of money." Ben and Victoria spent their wedding night at a small hotel in Taylor before heading out to their new property the next morning. As they rode in the wagon loaded with their few possessions, Victoria felt a sense of peace and excitement she had never experienced before. "Are you nervous?" Ben asked, glancing at her with a smile. "A little," she admitted. "Starting a ranch is a big undertaking." "I do not know much about cattle or horses or any of it." "You will learn," Ben said confidently. "And I will teach you everything I know. We are partners, Victoria, in everything. We will build this place together." And build it they did. The first year was hard, filled with back-breaking work and setbacks. They lived in a tent while they built their house, working from dawn until dusk sawing wood and hammering nails. Victoria learned to rope and brand cattle, to deliver calves, to mend fences. Her hands became calloused and her skin tanned dark from the sun, but she had never been happier. Ben was true to his word about being partners. He consulted her on every decision, listened to her ideas, and valued her contributions. When Victoria suggested they also raise chickens and keep a vegetable garden to supplement their income, he helped her build coops and turn the soil. When she proposed starting a horse breeding program focusing on smart, sturdy ranch horses, he agreed immediately and helped her select their first breeding stock. They faced challenges together. A harsh winter, their second year, killed several head of cattle. A drought the third summer left them desperately digging a new well. But through it all, their love only deepened. They worked side by side during the day and held each other close at night, grateful for every moment they had together. In the spring of their fourth year together, Victoria realized she was expecting a child. Ben was overjoyed, hovering over her anxiously and trying to keep her from doing any heavy work. Victoria tolerated his fussing for about a week before sitting him down firmly. "Ben Bradford, I love you, but you need to stop treating me like I am made of glass. Women have been having babies while working ranches since the beginning of time. I am not going to break." "I know," he said sheepishly. "I just worry. You are so precious to me, Victoria. I could not bear it if anything happened to you." "Nothing is going to happen to me," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are both going to be just fine, but I need you to trust me to know my limits." He nodded, and true to her word, Victoria continued working the ranch right up until 2 weeks before she delivered. In November of 1887, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's brown eyes. They named him Edmund Bennet Bradford, after both their fathers. Though they called him Eddie, Ben was a devoted father, walking the floor with Eddie when he cried at night, changing nappies without complaint, and spending hours just staring at his son in wonder. Watching him with their child made Victoria fall even more deeply in love with her husband. "Thank you," Ben whispered one night as they sat together, watching Eddie sleep in his cradle. "For what?" Victoria asked. "For everything. For loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me a son. For being you. I still cannot believe sometimes that you chose me." "I will always choose you," Victoria said firmly. "From that first day at the creek until my last breath, I will always choose you, Ben Bradford." 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Margaret Rose, who had her mother's stubborn streak and her father's easy smile. And 3 years after that, another son, James, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved books as much as his mother. The ranch prospered. Their cattle operation grew steadily, and Victoria's horse breeding program gained a reputation for producing exceptional animals. They hired help as needed but remained hands-on with every aspect of the business. They taught their children to work hard, to be honest, and to treat everyone with respect regardless of their station in life. Edmund Langford lived to see all 3 of his grandchildren born, spending his final years dividing his time between his home in Taylor and the ranch. He died peacefully in his sleep in 1893, secure in the knowledge that his daughter was happy and loved. Victoria grieved deeply, but found comfort in her family and in the life she and Ben had built. She knew her father had been proud of her, had approved of the woman she had become. As the years passed, Ben and Victoria became pillars of the community around Taylor. They were known for their fairness, their willingness to help neighbors in need, and their enduring love for each other. Young couples would sometimes come to them for advice, and Victoria would tell them the truth about what made a marriage work. "Love is essential," she would say. "But so is respect and partnership and choosing each other every single day. Marriage is not always easy, but when you are with the right person, even the hard times are bearable because you face them together. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Ben surprised Victoria by taking her on a trip to San Antonio. It was the farthest she had ever been from home, and she was enchanted by the city, the Spanish missions, the river walk. They stayed in a fine hotel and ate at fancy restaurants and danced like they had not done since their wedding. "Remember when you told me you wanted to see more of the world?" Ben said as they watched the sunset over the city. "I want to take you everywhere, Victoria. I want to show you all the beautiful things this life has to offer." "I have already seen the most beautiful thing," she said, touching his face gently. "I see it every day when I look at you." They returned home to find their children had kept the ranch running smoothly in their absence. Eddie was 23 now and had a sweetheart of his own, a smart young woman named Sarah who helped run her family's dry goods store in Taylor. Margaret was 21 and showed every sign of becoming an even better horse breeder than her mother. And James, at 18, was preparing to attend college in Austin, something his parents encouraged even though it meant he would eventually leave the ranch. "The world is changing," Ben said when Victoria worried about James leaving. "Our children should have every opportunity, even if it means they choose different paths than we did." "When did you become so wise?" Victoria teased. "I married well," he said with a grin. "You have made me better in every way." Eddie married Sarah the following spring, and within 2 years they had given Ben and Victoria their first grandson, a boisterous little boy named William. Margaret eventually married a neighboring rancher, a good man who respected her skills and ambitions. They worked their ranches in partnership, combining resources and building something impressive. James graduated from college and surprised everyone by returning to Taylor to practice law. He met a schoolteacher named Elizabeth, and they built a comfortable life in town while remaining close to the family ranch. As Ben and Victoria grew older, they slowly stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, trusting their children and eventually grandchildren to carry on what they had built. They spent their time instead enjoying each other's company, taking long rides across their property, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, telling stories to their growing collection of grandchildren. "You have any regrets?" Victoria asked one evening as they sat together, her hand in his. "Not a single one," Ben said firmly. "Every choice I made led me to you, and that makes everything worthwhile. Do you have regrets?" "Only that I did not meet you sooner," Victoria said. "But then again, maybe we met exactly when we were supposed to. Maybe if we had met earlier, we would not have been ready for each other." "Maybe," Ben agreed. "But I am grateful for every moment we have had, and I look forward to every moment still to come." They were blessed with many more years together. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The small ceremony in Taylor in 1887 had seemed so simple at the time, but it had been the beginning of something magnificent. Ben lived to be 78, dying peacefully in his sleep with Victoria beside him. She held his hand as his breathing slowed and stopped, tears streaming down her face but gratitude in her heart for the incredible life they had shared. "Thank you for everything, my love," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for building this beautiful life with me. I will love you forever." Victoria lived another 5 years, remaining sharp and active until the end. She spent her final years writing down the stories of her life, wanting her descendants to know how it had all begun. She wrote about Charles Whitmore and the betrayal that had seemed like the end of the world at the time. She wrote about meeting Ben at the creek, about falling in love, about building the ranch together. But most of all, she wrote about the lesson she had learned that day in her father's study when Charles had demanded the dowry before the Vows and Ben had said those simple words. A man like that would not do. Know your worth, she wrote to her granddaughters and great-granddaughters and all the women who would come after. Do not settle for someone who sees you as a transaction or a trophy. Wait for someone who sees you as a partner, who respects your mind as well as admires your face, who will stand beside you in the hard times as well as the good. Love should lift you up, not diminish you. And when you find that kind of love, hold on to it with both hands and never let go. Victoria passed away quietly one spring morning, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch of the house she and Ben had built with their own hands. She was 88 years old, surrounded by family, and the last word on her lips was Ben's name. They buried her beside her husband on a hill overlooking their ranch. The service was attended by over 200 people, a testament to the lives they had touched and the legacy they had built. Their children and grandchildren took turns sharing stories, painting a picture of a remarkable woman and an extraordinary love. The ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of their descendants. The house remained standing for another 60 years before it was carefully dismantled and rebuilt as part of a small historical museum in Taylor. Visitors could see the original structure where Ben and Victoria had raised their children, could read excerpts from Victoria's writings, could learn about how a chance meeting at a creek in 1883 had changed the course of so many lives. But perhaps their greatest legacy was not the ranch or the buildings, or even the family they created. It was the example they set of what love could be when it was built on respect, partnership, and choosing each other every single day. They had shown that the best marriages were not transactions or social arrangements, but true partnerships of equals. In Taylor, Texas, their story became legend. Young women facing pressure to marry for money or status would remember Victoria Langford, who had walked away from a wealthy suitor because he did not treat her with respect. Young men unsure of their worth would remember Bennet Bradford, who had proven that character mattered more than social position or family name. And couples struggling through hard times would remember that love was not always easy, but it was always worth fighting for. They would remember that the right person would stand beside you through drought and loss and hardship, would build a life with you one day at a time, and would choose you again and again until death finally parted you. The cottonwood trees still grew by the creek where Ben and Victoria first met. Local lore claimed that couples who visited the spot and drank from the creek would be blessed with lasting love. Whether or not this was true, many couples did visit, drawn by the romance of the story and the hope that they too could find what Ben and Victoria had found. And perhaps some of them did. Perhaps they learned the lessons Victoria had written down so carefully in her final years. Perhaps they understood that true love was not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but about seeing someone clearly, valuing them completely, and choosing to build something beautiful together. Because in the end, that was what Ben and Victoria had done. Against all odds, despite gossip and hardship and all the challenges life threw at them, they had built something that lasted. They had created a love story for the ages, one that would be remembered and retold for generations to come. And it had all started with a simple truth, spoken by a dusty cowboy to a heartbroken woman by a creek in Texas. A man like that would not do, because Victoria Langford deserved better. She deserved someone who would cherish her, respect her, and love her for exactly who she was. She deserved Bennet Bradford, and he, in turn, had been blessed beyond measure by the love of the most remarkable woman he had ever met. Together, They had proven that sometimes the best love stories were the ones that started with a broken engagement and a chance meeting. Sometimes the best marriages were the ones built on partnership rather than property. And sometimes the happiest endings were the ones that came from having the courage to walk away from what was wrong and toward what was right. Their story was a reminder that love, real love, was worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth choosing again and again and again until the very end.